Hey guys, CP here bringing you another JavaScript tutorial. In today, we'll be taking a look at creating a to-do tracker app, which will allow you to enter your to-dos and be able to delete them if you've completed them. We're going to take a look at using SessionStorage to store our to-dos so that whenever the page refreshes, it will add your new to-do, because with Vanilla JavaScript, you actually need the page to refresh to see the updated version of your array list. The way in React, which I'm thinking of creating later on, the same application just in React, we don't need to refresh the page. So my name is CPU. For all your first time comers in this channel, we create everything HTML, CSS and JavaScript related. So let's quickly take a look at what we'll be doing today. So if I enter in here, say create new video, and I say add this item, so I've added that to my list item. I can create a new one and say maybe review the video, which is this video I am creating now. I'm gonna have to review it, make sure that I speak clearly and you guys can hear me. And once I've done that, I can go ahead and say okay, upload it, upload to YouTube for you guys to watch. And suddenly decided I don't need to review this video. I am that awesome, I am that confident in my skills, so I can go ahead and just delete that item. As you guys have seen, I'm able to delete that item, and I've done some checks, if you can put it that way. So if I go ahead and say upload to YouTube and I say add item, it will give me a warning saying item exists. You already have that item in your list, so that I don't have duplicate items to do. With no longer ado guys, let's jump straight into this tutorial. So let's go ahead and get started with this one. What I'm going to do is I have my HTML file already created. I'm using Visual Studio Code for you guys that want to know, and I am using also an extension called Live Server. And it's this extension over here which allows me to run my HTML files on a local server. Okay, that's the extension I'm using. Let's go ahead and start with this one. I'm gonna say BT4. Let's say BT4 for bootstrap for $. And what that will do is, let me quickly guys just close this panel over here by pressing Ctrl B, close it. So what the B4 $ does is it generates me this empty HTML boilerplate file with the bootstrap, CSS and JavaScripts already linked, so I don't have to go to my CDN with my browser and go get this. So I'll go ahead and delete that. I don't need it. I'm going to leave the jQuery one because that's what I'm going to use. And I can go ahead and just remove those comments. So as you guys can see, if we look at our app, we have a container that contains our entire application. We have our heading, an input field, a button, and list items. Let's go ahead and create those. So I can go ahead and say container. And inside of my container, I'm going to have an h2, and my h2 is going to have a class called text-center. That's a bootstrap class. And what's my h2 inside of it? What I'm also going to have, it's another div, and that div I'm just going to call form container. Form container. In my form container, I'm going to have an input field and a button. Let's go ahead and generate that. So here's my h2 tag, and my h2 tag, I'm just going to go ahead and call it to-do tracker app. That's my h2 tag. And then in here, I'm going to go ahead and say that's my input, that's my button, that's my div closing tag. So in this div over here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some couple of bootstrap classes. I think you guys will really enjoy working with bootstrap classes once you get the hang of it. The first thing I want to do, create that space over there. Let's go ahead and add a class here called margin bottom, which is 4. So that's a bootstrap class. We have to add a margin bottom to this h2. And then my form container, what I want to do is to say I want to add a padding on my x-axis of 3. That's my form container. And then just below it, let's work on my input. My input, I'm going to add a bootstrap class also to it, which I'm going to call form-control. Okay, and I'm going to add an ID, and then the ID is going to call to-do_input. And I can go ahead and say placeholder, and my placeholder will say enter new item that what I called it? And just remove this, clear this out. It says enter task to complete. So I can just go and say enter new item to complete. Okay, so that's my input. And then my button, I'm also going to use some Bootstrap classes, as you guys might have guessed. It's called btn-primary. I think I'm going to stop saying Bootstrap classes from now on. Add item. Okay, so now I have my h2, I have my input, I have my add item button over here. And what I do know is from this app, if I click this, I want to add whatever's in this input to this array at the bottom. So obviously I'm going to have a function on click. So on click is going to be add item. I'm just going to ahead and call this add item, make it lowercase a, add item. So I'm going to create this function later in my JavaScript. So the next thing I want to do, I want to have a container for this ordered list over here. So I can go ahead and say dot item container. Yeah, I think I'm just going to call it dot item container, or let's call it dot list container because it's a list instead of a single item. So dot list container, and inside of this list container, what I'm going to have is an unordered list. So I can say ul, which has an ID to say to do's list. Okay, let's see if I have everything that I want to do. Maybe just instead of to do's list, let's just call it display to do. That makes more sense. That's more descriptive. Just display the to-dos. That's all you need to do. ul, display the to-dos. So if I save this quickly and I go live, it should open up a new tab for me, and this is what my app currently looks like. I'm just gonna go ahead and say list item, enter, say create new list item. I'm gonna save it. And as you guys can see, there is my list item over there in my unordered list right at the bottom. So now let's go ahead and get this app looking like this one. Okay, so what we want to do now is some styling. So I'm going to go ahead in my head section. I'm going to create some styling right at the top. So in my head section, let me just hit enter, and I'm going to say style because I'm going to inline style this. Not inline style, I'm going to style in my head section. I'm not going to use an external file for my CSS. So let's go ahead and quickly reset everything. Let's say box sizing is going to be border box. My margin is going to be 0, and then my padding is also going to be 0. Now let's go ahead and say my body tag. I'm just going to say display flex, and what I want to do is say align items, center, justify content, center. So all this does is going to push it to the center, and I want to add a min height to it of 100 VH. Okay, 100 view, and there we go. So I push it to the center of the screen horizontally and vertically. That's what I wanted to do with that one. And then let's go ahead and style this container over here. Dot container, which is my main app container. I'm going to give it a padding. And my padding I want to do, let's just make it 15 by 25 pixels. And I'm going to add a background color to it. My background is going to be EF. And let's save it. And then what I want to do is just take away those sharp corners right there, because over here I have rounded corners, but now I have sharp corners. Let's keep everything uniform. I'm going to say border dash radius. I'm going to make it 8 pixels. Save it, and there we go. There we have round corners over there. So that's more in the UI. If you're really into user experience, small stuff like that does make a big difference. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to style my form. Where is it? This form container over here. So I can go ahead and say form container. So my form container will be this two. So I want these two to align next to each other, and I can achieve that by just saying display flex. If I save it, there they are next to each other. So I can go ahead and say display flex, and I can say justify content space evenly. and save it. Okay, so now what I want to do is to say I want you to take up let's say 70% of the container, and I want you to take up 30% of the container. I can achieve that by going and say form dash control, which is the class on my input, and I can say flex to, okay, and then I can go ahead and say dot btn, which is the class on my button. I can say flex 1. If I save it, as you guys can see, now they're displayed nicely next to each other. Let me just go ahead and add a margin here by using a, which you guys might have guessed, that bootstrap class. So I can go ahead and say margin right, make it 2, save. There we go. Now we have a nice space between the two using that margin right. Guys, so the next thing that I want to style now, I just want to remove that dot, and in order to do that, I can call the only ul element in my DOM, and I'm gonna say list style. No, I don't want that list style there. As you guys have seen, it's gone, removed it. And then the next thing that I want to do is just style my list item. So my list item is going to have a class called list item. And what I want to do is I want to display flex. Okay, because I'm going to have 2 items in this list item. I'm going to give it a background color of white. And then I'm going to say my border radius. Border radius is going to be 5 pixels. And what I want to do is say align items center. Okay, I'm going to save it. Let me just go ahead and say, I'm not actually going to do it here. Do I need to go ahead? Let's go ahead and create this list item so that you guys can see visually how it would look like. Okay, so inside of my list item, I'm going to have a paragraph tag and an A tag and then font awesome icon. Okay, that much I already do know. By looking at this app, I know that I'm gonna have an A tag. I'm gonna have a paragraph tag which will hold this text. I'm gonna have an A tag which is gonna be clickable, and font awesome icon, which is that button icon over there for the delete. Okay, so let's go ahead quickly and create that list item just to see it visually. So let me just remove this, say enter. I'm gonna add this class first that I already entered there, which is the list dash item, which is the class that I currently have. I'm gonna add maybe say a padding on the x-axis of 2 and a padding on the y-axis of 2. Margin bottom 2. Let's add all of that. I'm not gonna say it's a bootstrap class anymore because you guys know by now it's bootstrap classes. And here I'm gonna add that create new list item, and I'm just gonna add another class here which comes with bootstrap 4, which is class called text dash muted. That's the one. And then I'm gonna create my A tag. So my A tag is gonna go nowhere, and I'm gonna add in my A tag. What I want to do is, I think I'm just going to add a function to this, which is actually going to delete the item. So I'm not going to add it now because this is just for display purposes. But inside it, I want to add that font awesome icon. So let's go ahead and on top over here, let's link that font awesome by saying FA for font awesome 4 with the $sign. And what that does is it linked my font awesome CSS in my head section. Isn't that cool? Makes life much easier. So let's go ahead here and say FA4 for font awesome 4 dash trash, which is that trash icon, and let's say save. If I save this, and you guys can see there I have my create list item, there I have my bin. I just need to style this. So if I go right here on top and to start styling this, what I can do is I'm just gonna head and start with my A tag. So A tag, which is the one surrounding the font awesome. First thing is a color. My color that I'm going to use is red. I'm just gonna say red. Okay, and then what I'm gonna do with my red is say I want to change this to say cursor, the pointer. That's what I want to do. I just need to say margin left margin left. I'm going to set it out to auto. Okay, so what that auto will do is it's going to push my A tag as far right as possible, because this A tag and this P tag, they're inside one element, which uses the display flex class to align them next to each other. So if I save this, it pushes this element right there to the right side of my application. Let me go ahead and just create the space between those two. I can do that by going to my list container and saying margin top, make it 4. All right, let's maybe not make it 4, let's make it 3. 4 seems a bit lot. There we go. So that space over there looks nice. Is there anything I'm probably missing? I do not think so. So yeah, so we have our app, we have our UI of our app. I think the next step that we're gonna need to do from here on is just create the JavaScript part of it. I just want to fix quickly this alignment issue I think I have over there. Let's see if we go ahead and add a padding on the x-axis of 2 and a padding on the y-axis of 2. Let's save it. And then let's see what we have. Currently it makes no difference. No difference at all? Really? Okay, we'll come back to that. Wait, let's quickly just inspect element. Aha. So my P tag has a margin bottom by default from Bootstrap. So let's quickly just get rid of that. Can I go ahead and do this? So margin bottom 0. There we go. So now we have our margin bottom 0. You can actually set it up like that. And my padding on the x-axis and padding on the y-axis, I think that's giving me an issue. Save it. Now we have a nice spacing around that item. Okay, let's get into the JavaScript part of things once more. So I'm gonna go ahead and create my script tags over here, and then the first thing I want to do is I'm going to create a variable, and this variable I'm going to call get-to-dos. Okay, so as you guys will see in a moment, in this if statement, what I'm doing is the following. I'm saying that check in my session storage if there is an item called to-dos. Okay, so I'm saying get the item to-dos in my session storage and return it. So if this returns true, okay, do the following for me. If this returns true, say session storage dot get that item for me. So what this will do is, if this is true, it will get that item and save it into this variable. Or else, if that is not true, just create an empty array for me. So get-to-dos will then be an empty array. So this is an if statement over here, and if this evaluates to be true, this is equal to say equal true. Sorry, don't write true like that, you write it like this. True. If this is equal to true, then do this, get that item for me in the session storage, save it into this variable, or else create an empty array. Okay, now because we know we want an empty array, I can actually go remove this. And what we want to do is, let's do a test quickly. If I go ahead and say console, which is my favorite thing, console.log, with this I check my variables if they are doing what I want them to do, get-to-dos. If I save it quickly, now go ahead and inspect element, check my console there, it returns an empty array because in my session there is no such item as to-do. But what if we created that item quickly? So I can go ahead and say session.storage.set a new item, and then the key for that item is called to-dos, and the value that I want to pass through will be an array of, say, add items, and then my next value I'm just gonna say value added. So this array, I want it to be saved in my storage, and then it must be saved under the key to do. Okay, but what I want to do is I want to stringify this array, okay, because I want to save the string value of that array. So I can go ahead and say JSON dot stringify, and what it's doing is, as you can see in the description, it will save an object or an array as a string, so it will convert it to a string. Let's go ahead and then do the closing bracket over there. And that way, if I save this, what's going to happen is I'm just going to go ahead and do this, comment this out, click on save. So let's go ahead to my storage over here and then go ahead to SessionStorage, open it up using this URL that I'm currently in. You guys will see my key. I currently have a to-dos key, which is what I've set my key to be over here. And then my values, it's an array, it's a string form array. So I can go ahead and retrieve this the same way that I saved it using jQuery, using JSON. I need to retrieve it again using JSON. So what I will do is go ahead and say JSON.parse that string value for me and return it into its original format or form array. So it's going to either be an object or an array. In this case, I saved it as an array. So if I go ahead and say JSON.parse and I save this, if we check console.log over here, now get to do's is that array with the values in that to do session storage. And that way, if I refresh the page, I don't lose those values. Okay. That's what we have currently over here. So I'm going to remove this test. I'm going to remove this console.log, and I'm going to go ahead and delete that value from the storage. I actually want to set it as I go along. So my session storage should not have my key that I saved it as. Okay, so I hope you guys understand that. So the next thing that I want to do, I want to get my unordered list element over here that I'm going to use to create list item child elements of it. So by going ahead and say const and just create spacing over here, I'm going to scroll down for you guys to better see this. I can go ahead and say const UL for unordered list is equal to $, because I'm using jQuery. I can go as a hashtag display to do. Okay, so display to do's, which is that ID over there. Then I'm going to create another variable. I'm going to let I is equal to 0. You guys will see in a minute where I'm going to use this variable that I've created. The first thing that I want to go ahead and do now is that on this button element, I created a function called add item. So let's work with that one firstly. Const add item is equal to my function over here, arrow function that I'm creating. And what I want to do is inside my arrow item, inside my arrow function, once someone click this button, go get this input value. I can do that by saying let new underscore item equal to $. I'm using jQuery over here, and that ID I called it to do underscore input. Okay, so I call it to do underscore input, and this will return an object with an array in it, and it's a 0 position. I actually have the input. If I can show you guys quickly over here for those that want to see what do I mean. If I go ahead and say console.log and I'm logging out this new underscore item and I saved it, I'm quickly going to click on this button. You see, so it gets this object, and at position 0 it actually has that input. So I'm going to need to go ahead and set this to position 0. I'm going to save it. I'm going to click this button. Now I have that input, and I can go ahead and say dot value right here at the bottom, dot value, to get the value of that input. Okay, so what I want to do is the following. I want to check firstly, is this not empty? Okay, and also the value that I've entered here, does it not exist already? Those are the two checks that I want to do, because I don't want to add an empty child to this list item, and I don't want to add a to do item that's already currently in the list. So I'm gonna go ahead and say if new item, what did I do now? Let's go ahead quickly and remove this. All I wanted to do was say new underscore item dot its value. If its value it's not equal to an empty string, and the new value does not exist in this array return. So I can go ahead and say get to-dos, which is this array right here on top, dot includes new underscore item dot value. Okay, so I'm going to need to go ahead over here, add my exclamation mark to make it negative. So say if this returns false, then we can go ahead and do whatever's inside this brackets. Okay, so the first thing I want to do inside of this brackets is just add this value to this array. So I can go ahead and say get to-dos dot push new item dot value. So add its value to the array, and then once I've added that value to the array, I want to add this new array to replace this array in the session storage. So I'm going to replace the current array in the session storage with the new one that has the new value. So I can go ahead and say session storage dot set item, and what you want to do is the following. I want to say the key is called to-dos, so it's going to override what's currently in there, and I'm going to say JSON dot stringify get to-dos. So stringify this array for me and save it in there. Okay, once I've done that, I can go ahead and say new item dot value is equals to empty, because I want this input field to be empty once again. And then once that is done, I want to refresh the window. So I can say window dot location dot reload. Okay, so now I'm refreshing the window, and I'm just gonna go and put in here a return, because outside of this if statement, now I'm gonna add a value also, and I don't want that to execute if this if statement was true, or if this if statement was executed. Now that I've added that value inside of that array, the next step for me that I would want to do is to say, okay, I want to add a type of alert if this item is either blank or the item already exists into this array. And how I will do that, I'm also going to use some Bootstrap for that, the Bootstrap alert, and that I'm going to put right on top of my user UL. I'm going to say alert, which is Bootstrap 4. I'm going to add a closable to it, and then what I'm going to say is oops, let's say field empty or item exists. Okay, so this alert's gonna show. If I save this quickly, you'll see we say oops, field empty or item exists. So let me say field is empty, so it makes more sense. Field is empty or item exists in array in list. So that's my warning message over there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take away the show class over here, which is a Bootstrap class. I'm going to take away the show class, and I'm going to add an ID to this, which I'm just going to call, can I call it alert? I'm going to call it alert box, and I'm going to take away this script over here, which I honestly do not need. And in my script tag right here at the bottom, so if this if statement doesn't execute, I want it to show that alert box for me. So I can go ahead and say $, for jQuery, and the ID is called alert underscore box dot add class. Okay, and the class that I'm adding is show, which is the class that I actually just removed. And then let's go ahead and say a class which is show. Let me save this. As you guys can see, now what I do have is a space over here because of this div. It does exist, but it's actually just not display none, but its visibility is 0, so you can't see it, but you can actually see the space because in the DOM it does exist. So we actually don't want it to exist in the DOM as well. What I will do is I'm just going to add inline style. I'm going to style, say display none, save it, and then you guys can see now it's removed. And what I can do over here is then says here I can say remove attribute, So I'm just chaining to this, and the attribute that I want to remove, it's called style. Let's save. So basically, if I click now add item, this should show, as you guys can see, because this thing was empty and this if statement skip and this executed. Awesome. What else do I need to do over here? I think I got that covered. The next step for me now to do is to just add this array, to loop throughout this array, and then to create this items. Okay, let's go ahead and do that one next. So what I'm gonna do is, let me just do it before the add item one, because this should actually execute before any function execute. So let's say get to do's dot for each to do, return an item, and then we'll do the following with that item in the array. I'm gonna say let to do $, okay, which is jQuery. I'm gonna add backticks to it, opening a closing backtick, and then I'm gonna create this list item in it. I can actually go ahead and just copy this list item because that's what I'm going to use anyway. Copy that list item. I can go in here in my jQuery, that to do equal to that $. I can paste my list item over here, take away this, don't need it. And then what I want to do over here, where I have my text, I can just go ahead and say $ curly braces item, which is this item over here, and that's about it. Now let's earlier created this I variable over here, which was set to 0. So what I'm going to do is the following. Inside of this, I'm going to increment this I, but where I'm going to use this I is actually inside of my A tag, so that I can set a unique ID or a unique param for each A tag. When I delete it, I can use that ID to delete that specific item. You with me? Because in my array, I don't really have indexes that I've set or IDs that I've set. I'm just going to use this guy over here. Make sense? Okay, let's go ahead then and say in my A tag over here, that A tag that I currently have over there. So what I will do is I'm going to add an onClick function to that A tag and say onClick is equal to quotation mark, and I'm going to add a function called the remove item, and that function I'm going to pass through item underscore $, that ID. So it's going to be item 1, item 2, item 3, depending on how many items I have. Okay, and my second param is just going to be that ID. Okay, so 1, there we go, and that's what I'm using this thing for over here. And then once that it's complete, what I want to do is say I must increment. So every time you do this, you're going to be 0, then going to be 1, 2, 3, depending how many items I currently have in my array. Okay, what I want to do is I want to append this list items to this unordered list, and I can do that by going say unordered list dot append to do, which is this variable that I've created over here. Okay, let's save it. Let's see. So currently I don't think I have anything here except just create new item, which is actually this guy. So if I go ahead and delete you, save it, that's blank. Let's say create new video, add item, there we go. So added that item using this function over here, which added to the array, and then the to-dos just ran through it and created a new one. So if I go ahead and say create new video, let's say upload video to YouTube, added item, we have both of those items. Okay, so finally the last thing that we need to do, we just need to work on our remove items function, which will fire once we click this bin icon over here. Let's go ahead and set that one up. So what I will do is, let's go ahead and say const remove item, which is this function used inside of this a tag, is equal to, and I'm using two params over there. One I'm just going to call item underscore ID. The other one I'm going to call position. Position. I'm going to do an arrow function. Okay. And with that arrow function, what I'm going to do, maybe let me just not use an arrow function for this one. I'm just going to use a normal function, like a normal person would do. Go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and say $jQuery. So $sign item ID. So get whatever it is by this item ID. As you guys will see, I do believe that I am missing something though, because I'm getting it by the item ID, but I'm not setting the item ID anyway on the list item, and I think that will cause some major issues, and that is why I need to have the ID actually on the list item itself. Okay, so on the list item itself, I need to go ahead and add an ID to it, and that ID I'm going to call item underscore $sign ID. So I'm going to use actually this ID for this entire list item DOM element to remove it. Okay, makes sense. that just clicked when I actually went and said, okay, use $sign get element by ID, and I've realized that this list item doesn't have an ID. So get element by ID, and what I'm going to do is the following. Once I've got that element by ID, I'm going to say ID dot remove. Okay, because I'm using jQuery, I can just call the remove on it, and then what I'm going to do is also update my array, get underscore to do's, which is my array, dot splice, okay, and then what I'm going to do is splice it at position, which is what I'm giving it over here, that position, which is being passed through there, and only one, remove only one item, and then I can go ahead and reset the session, item again because something was removed. So I can go ahead and say SessionStorage dot set item. I'm giving it the same key value to do's, and what you're saving is the JSON format, JSON string format, stringify format of the new array, which is get to do's. Okay, so now this array will have one less value, and I'm resaving it inside that session storage with the same key, so I'm overriding whatever was saved there. Okay, and last but not least, let's do a window dot location dot reload to make sure that our UI updates, and then we can see what we have done in the UI. Let me save that. So we currently have two values over there. Let me create a new one saying review video. I'm going to add and say add item. Now we have three. I'm going to delete upload video to YouTube, and upload video to YouTube has been deleted. So as you guys could see that we are creating a list item, and once we've created that list item, is that we are storing it in the session. We are overwriting whatever was in the session with a new array that we have just created, and then we are giving that back to the user by refreshing the browser. So I'm thinking what I'm going to do next is that I'm going to create the same application, a to-do tracker application, but I'm going to do it in React, which is exciting. Let's do it in React, and then we will see how much easier it is when we use JavaScript frameworks, and not just JavaScript frameworks in any job spec. So whether it's PHP and using Laravel, or you're using React or Vue or any other Angular JavaScript framework, it makes your job so much easier. As you guys would have seen, we had to jump through all of those hoops just to create this small application. But let's see if when we create it in React, will it go much faster, smoother, and easier, or is it much better just creating application in vanilla JavaScript? For all you guys who haven't done so, I do encourage you to subscribe to this channel, hit the bell notification button so that you get notified next time I publish a new video, and hit me up in the comments, like the videos. They help for some weird reason. And till next time guys, stay safe.